Sometimes people make use of false guilts, and so they find an excuse for closing their eyes to their very real guilts.
Weasels in a Box, Book 2, Chapter 2. When did I eat at this sub place? Was that another tour? I don't know, Jack. It's possible. You've been damn near everywhere in this country. It wasn't with us, that I know for sure. The bass player from the Boys from Wyoming walks hunched over with his hands in the front pockets of his raggedy jeans. These are probably his work pants from his hard labor job back in Wyoming. There's no distinction for him between working on tour and working on his job in the sewers, digging big holes back in Wyoming. It had to be on tour with the Flaming Faggots. That must have been quite a tour. It was. We all traveled in one van. We had 7 people living in that van. We split the tour in half. We went here to the East Coast for about 4 weeks, and then we stayed home for a week, and then we went west for 4 weeks, and then we never toured again. Flaming Faggots, by the way, is the Queers. Why didn't you tour after that? Immense differences in opinions. The two of you walk up the street in silence. Semi-Famous played in New Hampshire with the Flaming Faggots in their basement back in '91, where it so happens you and Franklin stumbled upon a kid in a closet huffing butane. He thought he was the life of the party. He died a couple years later. If it wasn't Fred Lee Faggot's place, the band would have packed up right then and gotten miles away from there. The band would not put up with drug abuse. Then Semi-Famous and the Flaming Faggots joined together again on the 8-week tour in '93. On that later tour, the two bands played at the Middle Eastern Cafe in Boston, which was considered the Flaming Faggots' actual hometown, Boston, Massachusetts. Sounded better than Xavier, New Hampshire. The Boston show in '93 came very close to not happening at all. Semi-Famous had fairly recently gained its semi-fame, and the band had finally gotten to a point where it could demand from the promoters a certain amount of respect and necessary commands to accommodate the band. It was the most productive tour, both for exposure and financial benefit. It was the only tour that turned a profit. It wasn't enough of a profit to split amongst band members to pay reasonable wages, but it bought a few microphones, guitar stands, a used PA, and some guitar picks. Mr. Famous had written up an agreement between band and venue to be dispersed to all the promoters prior to the tour. I actually think I still have one of these. I have like a file cabinet of old contracts and royalty splits and I don't know, like accounting checkbooks from Bank One of America or whatever we were. Changed hands like 4 times. But I also think I have the thing that Ben wrote up to be sent to all the promoters. It was fairly detailed, actually. Let's see where it says. It contains stipulations and grievances that the band did not want to deal with anymore. You booked the last 2 tours by yourself with some geographical instructions from Franklin. Yeah, he would hand me this when we got together at rehearsals, or sometimes he would mail it to me because we weren't seeing, we didn't really see each other a lot when we weren't touring or recording. By that time, I mean, even by '93. But he would just send me these lists of places that, he was really good at sort of lining it up where he wanted to go, and then I would do all the fine details to make sure we weren't backtracking. Then I would call all the venues and set up all the dates. Let's see where we were. I lost my track. You hashed out details with a handful of trusty and true promoters from former positively reinforced gigs. You got the numbers of a few other less respected promoters and punk kids with access to VFW halls and storefront shoeboxes and third-rate, fire-inspected, flawed corner pubs with enough electricity to ignite a clove cigarette. Franklin's most logical demands meant nothing but resistance in an alternative community that thought there was no use for stage monitors. A singer losing his voice while shouting above the concert crowd was punk. Who cares if the band has 6 billion more shows to perform along the 3 zillion days of a 16 god trillion mile tour? This band had to sacrifice their singer's voice here in this town, performing in front of these 15 punks that have traveled 3 days from the back hills of a faraway land by way of wooden stagecoach with hand-carved polygon tires that they borrowed from their nearly deceased, abusive, alcoholic parents. The Flaming Faggots walk into the Middle Eastern Cafe unprepared in their well-rehearsed, unprepared way. They make a stink about posters and weather, but they really don't care. Just put them on stage in front of an audience of at least 12, and they will cast their fuck yous and rhythmic, melodic, stupid tunes that stick in your head like glue made from the liquid remains of a young Tommy James, and the ashed, burned, and crashed particles of Buddy Holly into the center of the crowd and make them dizzy with an original, age-old, distorted, simplistic repetition of chords and gestures. That might be what Ben had said that I was bad-mouthing Joe in the book. To me, that was lovingly. I was, poking fun at the same time, but I always loved the Queers. I think they're more consistent than we are with melodic songs. The Flaming Faggots don't care about monitors. They pretend not to care about monitors. They don't know how to pretend to care about not caring about pretending to care about the monitors. If Fred Lee Faggot loses his voice, he blames it on the moment and cancels future shows, sometimes with notice, sometimes without notice. With a sore throat, he has been known to say things like, "It's all part of the job. You gotta fight in the trenches with the troops." On certain randomly chosen occasions, he authorizes his sub-faggots to sing for him while he prances along the back of the stage, playing his guitar between his knees, periodically storming the front of the stage and placing his foot on a monitor, if there are monitors, contorting his face with each note and giving the performance with old-style rock and roll flamboyance. It is moments like this that remind you that no matter what a band's philosophy on punk is, the audience just wants to see a stage performance just like any other rock and roll band. This has always been accepted by you and on many occasions enjoyed thoroughly, but it bothers the hell out of Franklin Famous, who, by the way, happens to be quite an energetic and original performer himself. You walk into the Middle Eastern Cafe with cash box in hand. The money is always with you, and someone from the band always has to be at least a few steps away. You got pretty good at protecting the money, even to the point of the band hating you because you wouldn't give them an extra buck or two for dinner. A per diem had been set before the tour, and you made sure the band stuck to it. On many of the earlier tours, there weren't daily allowances. You and Frank would just purchase a jar of peanut butter and a loaf of bread, and the band would live on that for days. That's not even exaggerating. We would do that. Sometimes we didn't even have like a knife. We would just use a pen. Mr. Famous is a few steps behind, looking from corner to corner to see what piece of evidence will make itself apparent for him to throw his hands in the air, just one large or small detail out of place to allow him the contracted right to head back out the exit and sit perfectly still in the passenger side of the van, with no intention of returning. At every venue, while walking toward the promoter, you have to review in your head whether or not you had sent this particular venue the band rules, the agreement, the contract with actual signatures. A simple list with no absurdist rock star request, like 3 bowls full of chili pepper jelly beans, or a vat of red M&Ms, or a keg of beer for each band member, and a 12-pack of Corona for each and every crew member, or dancing girls with snowflake-shaped pasties. A detailed list of the basics. That's all it is, really. Of course, the between the lines is chock full of the hostile and cynical tone of Mr. Franklin's famous pen. But the basics are there. It is a list of elements that are important to the band, stage requirements that go deceptively unnoticed by the spectators, but leave detrimental dents in the long-lasting, unconsciously perceived performance. Very true, John Jughead. Preach it. Back to the book. A list of how many microphones and stands are needed, how much power the speaker should handle, the latest time the band is willing to perform, no more than 3 bands on a bill, accurate written figures recording the attendance. For a while, since about halfway through the second tour, the band members, under Franklin's recommendation from info retrieved by conversing with other touring bands, had started taking turns standing by the entrance with a counter in the front pocket, keeping track of all the paying customers. As time went on, you became the consistent one taking on this job. You like to be around the people at the concerts, and you are also able to get work done, unlike Dread, similar to Vittles before him, who would rather jump around and lose himself and babble and muddle, who just didn't like to be around people. Mr. Famous would take on the job occasionally, but he began to feel safer on his own, alienated in the back of the van, calming his anxieties and preparing himself for an hour and a half of singing and handing out verbal beatings. It was shocking to discover how many honest promoters tried to underpay the band based on the supposed attendance. It was sad that a band had to resort to such techniques. You would not have come up with such an idea for keeping track. You still wanted to be able to trust people to do what was right. At shows at the larger venues, you would let the promoter know by making your presence at the door somewhat of a nuisance, and when keeping count at the small places run by punk kids, you felt bad that you could not trust these kids dedicated to the music, so you would hide the counter in your front pocket. You were happy when the numbers worked out, and on that rare occasion at a punk house where the difference in numbers were just too ridiculous not to mention, you felt betrayed. Why would they do such a thing? Especially since the punk kid from the gig the night before, which was held in his mother's daycare, would have given his whole life savings to make us happy, to give us enough money to make it to the next town. Plus he gave the band bowls of Tootsie Rolls and fruit punch, let the band stay at his house where his mother cooked mini wieners for the whole crew at 3 a.m. That's true, too. That's one of those memories I'll never forget. I hear recently someone contacted me and said that they have an audio of that show. I think they sent it to me. I'll have to check my email. JJ Bedbug? Yes. I'm promoter guy from Boston. We talked on the phone. And it is at this point, before cordials get too friendly, that you bring up the agreement to make sure that this show can indeed occur without hesitation. I sent you an agreement, right? You ask him this question with an air of confidence, as if you were telling him a fact. Oh, let me read it again. I sent you an agreement, right? You ask him this question with an air of confidence, as if you were telling him a fact, confirming rhetorically the thorough job that you had done. But underneath that fortress of professionalism, there's a thick layer of doubt. See, I was actually doing a staged reading of the actual doubt when I should have been hiding it. You were not sure he sent back the signed portion of the agreement. You were not so sure you sent him one in the first place. Sure. Do you need me to go get it? Ah, a cool, refreshing breeze of relief, only noticeable to cats, dogs, and a few online psychics, pass over your body. And then, we got everything you need. Pretty simple. Except for the stage monitors. It's no big deal. You won't need those in here. How can he say such a thing? He says this blunderbuss thing with an air of confidence that mocks your air of confidence. His confidence is ignorant. Your confidence is plastic, yet empirical. Semi-Famous's reputation for nitpicking to a perceived assholeristic level has become more semi-famous than the band itself. How can he smile and say that thing that is so hideous to your ears? Sorry, I gotta rub my nose. Does he realize what anxieties he has just inflicted upon you? How many months he has just heaped on top of your life? Gray hairs he has poked into your crown of your unfledged, frolicsome head? You are dumbfounded. All you can think to say is, what do you mean? And all he can think to say is, what do you mean, what do I mean? His confident, albeit ignorant, smile begins to shrivel. The image of 300, no, let's make it 400 Bostonian punks gathering for a non-happening materializes in your head. They form a mosh pit and slam dance around your brain. Monitors, you say with a metallic monotone intensity. We need monitors. Your eyes rotate inward and outward in an attempt to oversee the intense activity around your cerebellum while still remaining engaged in the present moment with Mr. Promoter Guy, who has just said something very upsetting. We don't have any. And then, what's the problem? Mr. Famous speaks from behind you. He is behind you now. He was over there, wherever over there is, but now he is here, behind you, sensing rising problems, poising himself for a principled retreat. How are you going to handle this situation? How can you make this work? Try to send Mr. Famous away. Stall. Sadly, the promoter is driven by instincts opposed to your own, continuing on with his nonchalance toward his own blunderful disregard of a major subsection of Semi-Famous's agreement, referring to the importance, the critical necessity for working monitors. He says to Franklin, there's no problem. We just couldn't get monitors. Fuck this shit, man. We're out of here. Mr. Famous turns towards the exit. You and Mr. Promoter Guy watch the back of his head as he strolls towards the door. Before exiting, he taps his finger on an amp that Muddle had just struggled to carry into the club and speaks to you over his shoulder. Tell the guys to pack up the gear. He leaves. Franklin Famous found what he was looking for. It was so simple, one missing element. No solution necessary. A hard-ass blast of stubborn reality. The black and white view of a situation that wipes away all the grays. No lines to fill in with colored crayons. Negation as retaliation. Negation as retaliation. Disregarding the need for monitors was a major mess-up. You would have dropped any other request from the list before doing away with the section stipulating the importance of monitors. The band has learned a few things, having been on the road for 5 years, playing every night for weeks in kids' basements and small, smoke-filled clubs with amplifying systems made out of old ripped speakers, stereo components, spit, and wild pussy willows, has greatly affected the throat of Franklin Famous. These rudimentary primitive devices can work in rehearsals when the singer does not have to yell above crowds and put on a show that balances between self-destruction and riotous laughter. You have seen Mr. Famous drinking tea late into the night and early the next morning to soothe his technically untrained vocal cords. He coughs and sips and smokes his cigarettes. Is he serious? Oh, he's dead serious. Maybe I can send someone out to find some monitors somewhere. I think that is your only choice. Either that, or tell everyone to go home. The promoter guy from Boston calls over a lackey. They both exit into the office and start making calls. You walk out to the van. So what the fuck's happening? They're trying to track down some monitors. Sorry, coughing on an almond seed. An almond nut? That's all he says. He has his face buried in his notebook, writing down sentences and striking out others. You know he wants to play this show. It's the Flaming Faggot's hometown. It's going to be quite an event. How can he act so calm, so indifferent? Is he playing hardball, or does he just not care? Has he convinced himself that these shows don't matter? Is there any other reason to perform than to make enough money to get us to another town? Has he lost his passion for causing controversy and trying to shock people into thinking for themselves? Well, these are all questions that spark the making of the book. A lot of this book is my relationship with the band and trying to understand him, and this seems to be like hitting a lot of them right on the head. Maybe he now believes no one can get anybody to think for themselves that is not already thinking for themselves. Maybe he's lost faith in any kind of message he may have believed he was helping to spread. The band has only been touring for 5 years, and at an average of only about one minor tour a year. Could someone get this jaded from such little exposure? The promoter runs out to the van. Okay, we found a rental shop that is open on Sundays. We got to get there in 5 minutes before they close. Are you sure we need to do this? That's im-fucking-dubitably correct, Franklin retorts without even looking up from his notebook. He then shuts the van door. The promoter guy from Boston hops into his car and returns a half hour later with his trunk and back seat loaded with new speakers, coiled cords, and hardware. Disaster has been averted yet again. Luckily, this kid cared enough to make this happen. He may have been angry, but we hope he learned a lesson about reading fine print. Maybe he learned that there are some bands that aren't willing to bend on points involved with their integrity and basic needs. Don't book a band if you can't pull through. Don't assume you know what a punk band will do without their necessities if they are given no other choice. There's always another choice. You came back from that tour with sore knuckles and gray hair. These two things, along with a stiff neck, are symptoms of overwhelming tension and anxiety. You went straight to your room and slept for 2 days, only waking to pee and eat some food. And then a few days later, right back on the road to deal with more of the same, and an even longer road to travel in the West, where all venues are 6 to 10 hours apart. Wow, I think that's probably one of my more well-written chapters. I think I had known from very near the beginning that I was going to write about the contracts that Ben had in this situation in Boston with the Queers. It was such a tense moment for me, but I believed in everything that Ben wanted, but we just dealt with it differently. And this also foreshadows an incident, a huge incident with the band that comes up in a later chapter. So thanks very much, and I think I'm going to put this to bed without any biographical things at the end. So tonight you just get book 1, book 2, chapter 2, and that is done. Good night. Thanks, everybody. Hey, everybody, once again, if you are enjoying these, if you can, spare some money and donate to my Patreon or to my GoFundMe. The GoFundMe is specifically for a project that I'm working on where me and my mom are writing a book together about her life. Her memory has been going the last year and probably won't get any better, so I'm trying to get all of that down. So if you can, support these projects so that I can keep reading these books and spend time on that and spend time with my mother. Thanks a lot, everybody. That's just for you.